Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a slave? You probably don't. Slaves were considered property. They could be bought, sold, or inherited. Children born to a female slave were also slaves. Slavery was cruel and brutal for everyone involved, but especially for the children. Slavery in America began with the arrival of the first African slaves in Virginia in 1619. The transatlantic trade routes that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas caused slavery to spread throughout the South. The Southern economy grew quickly because of the production of cash crops like tobacco, rice, indigo, and later cotton. This was only possible through the use of slave labor. Slaves were forced to work long hours in the hot sun without pay. They weren't paid because their owners considered them property. Also, if they were no longer able to work, there was no retirement home waiting for them. They were simply put out to die. Life as a slave was scary and dangerous. If slaves were caught running away, they were severely punished. Slaves had to follow a strict set of rules. They weren't allowed to leave their owner's property without permission. They also couldn't testify in court or make contracts. They weren't even allowed to get married. Marriages between slaves had to be performed by a minister and registered with the state. Slaves were sometimes separated from family members when they were sold. Sometimes an entire family would be sold together. But even this was not common. Most slaves didn't know where their families were or even if they were alive. Although slavery was illegal after the Civil War, discrimination against blacks continued. Jim Crow laws were established in the South to enforce racial segregation. Slaves were seen as less than human, so it wasn't unusual for slave owners to separate families when they sold slaves. Sometimes an entire family would be sold together. But even this was not common. Most slaves didn't know where their families were or even if they were alive. Some slaves managed to escape and find freedom in the North. Others resisted by slowing down their work or breaking their tools. Some slaves rebelled by running away. In 1848, William Still published the Underground Railroad Records. This book gave details on how to escape to freedom in the North. By following the Underground Railroad, slaves were able to reach freedom. In the North, there were people who helped slaves escape. These people were called conductors. They would lead slaves to freedom through secret pathways. These pathways were often used at night. It was too risky to travel during the day. Many slaves were caught and returned to their owners, but others made it to freedom thanks to the help of abolitionists. It took many years for slavery to end in America. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was passed. It outlawed slavery. But even after slavery was outlawed, discrimination against blacks continued. Let's talk about life as a slave. First, we will discuss their living conditions. Slaves were forced to live in crowded, dirty houses or shacks. They had to share beds with other slaves and sometimes with animals. They did not have enough blankets or sheets. Slaves had to make their own clothing. It was made from scraps of material that were thrown away by their owners. Slaves were given very little food. They had to eat whatever their owners gave them. Usually this was leftover food from their owners' meals. Sometimes they were given tasks to do in the kitchen. Then they could eat what they cooked. Slaves were not allowed to take food from their owners. If they were caught stealing food, they were punished severely. Now, let's talk about slave punishments. If slaves were lazy or disobedient, they were punished. Slave owners believed that slaves had to be kept in their place. They had to work hard and obey their masters. If slaves were not working hard enough, their owners would beat them. They used whips, chains, and other tools to punish slaves. Sometimes they would lock them up in a room or make them walk barefoot across hot coals. Cruel punishments like these were common. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about slave auctions. When slaves were sold at auction, they were treated like objects. They were paraded around so that their owners could look them over. Sometimes slaves were separated from their families and sold to different owners. Imagine being separated from your family and not knowing where they are or if they're still alive. That's what happened to many slaves. Next, we will talk about slave marriages. As mentioned earlier, slaves could not marry without the permission of their owners. Slave marriages were not recognized as legal unions, but slaves still wanted to commit to one another. So they had ceremonies to join together as man and wife. These ceremonies were led by ministers or elders in the community. They did the best they could to make these unions strong and lasting. But if one of the spouses was sold, the marriage was broken up. The slave owners did not recognize these marriages, so they could end them whenever they wanted. Let's move on to resistance to slavery. Even though slavery was brutal, many slaves resisted it in different ways. Some slaves broke things or pretended to be sick. Others ran away or rebelled. Nat Turner led a rebellion in 1831. He and his followers killed many whites in Virginia. But the rebellion was put down and Nat Turner was executed. This rebellion inspired other slaves to resist. Some joined groups that helped slaves escape to freedom. Others planned their own rebellions. Finally, let's talk about freedom. In 1865, slavery ended in the United States. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery. But even after slavery was abolished, black people were still discriminated against. They were not allowed to vote or serve on juries. They were also not allowed to own land or businesses. Discrimination against black people continued for many years. It wasn't until the 1960s that the Civil Rights Act outlawed discrimination based on race. So what would you have done if you were a slave? Would you have tried to escape or resisted in some other way? Or would you have just accepted your fate and tried to make the best of it? There is no right answer. Each person would have to decide for themselves what they would do in that situation. Now let's move on to our questions for you. What was the most interesting thing you learned about slavery? What would you have done if you were a slave? Do you think slavery should have been abolished sooner? Leave your answers in the comments below. We would love to hear what you have to say. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any of our videos. We have lots of fun and educational videos for you. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please give us a like and share it with your friends. Remember, knowledge is power, and there is power in numbers. Let's grow this community together. As we continue to explore the depths of history, we encounter stories that challenge our understanding of the past and shape our perspective on the world today. One such story is that of Solomon Northup, whose autobiography, 12 Years a Slave, narrates his harrowing experience of being kidnapped and sold into slavery despite being a free black man. His story sheds light on the dark reality of pre-Civil War America and serves as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. His story begins in 1841, when he was living a comfortable life in New York with his wife and children, working as a carpenter and part-time musician. However, his world is turned upside down when he is drugged and sold into slavery in New Orleans. What makes Northup's story particularly disturbing is that he was not your typical victim of slavery. He was educated, articulate, and a skilled craftsman, yet he found himself stripped of his rights, dignity, and personal autonomy. As he navigates the brutal realities of slavery in the American South, he encounters a range of characters, some of whom exhibit kindness and humanity, while others revel in the subjugation of their fellow human beings. One of the most striking aspects of Northup's narrative is his depiction of the psychological toll slavery takes on its victims. Despite the physical hardships he endures, he is haunted by the constant fear of being separated from his family, the dehumanizing treatment he receives from his enslavers, and the gnawing uncertainty about his future. His story is a testament to the enduring power of hope as he clings to the belief that he will one day be reunited with his loved ones. In 1853, after 12 years of captivity, Northup is finally able to secure his freedom with the help of abolitionist allies. Upon his return to New York, he is greeted as a hero, giving speeches and writing articles to raise awareness about the horrors of slavery. His autobiography was published in 1853 and became an instant bestseller, further fueling the abolitionist movement. Today, Northup's story continues to resonate with readers worldwide, reminding us of the importance of fighting for justice and equality in the face of oppression.